The early morning sun had barely touched the concrete grounds of Fort Benning when Maya Thompson stepped out of the bus, her boots crunching against the gravel, with a confidence that made her posture impossible to ignore. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth and fuel from passing vehicles, carrying with it the faint hum of military life already in motion. Around her, recruits scrambled in small groups, their voices a mix of nerves and determination, but Maya barely noticed them. Her focus was inward. Every step, every movement was measured, precise, disciplined. She had trained her entire life for this moment, and she refused to let anything distract her. Across the parade ground, Staff Sergeant Logan Carter observed her from a distance. He had been in the Army for nearly a decade, toughened by deployments, combat simulations, and countless training programs. To him, most recruits were easy to read. He could spot the ones with fire and the ones who were all show. When his eyes landed on Maya, he smirked almost involuntarily. At first glance, she seemed harmless. Her uniform fit her perfectly, her posture poised, but her face. It was too serene, too composed, almost delicate. "Pretty face, no grit," he muttered under his breath, loud enough for a nearby recruit to catch and stifle a laugh. Carter already decided she would be easy to dismiss, another name on a roster that would fade quickly. Maya, for her part, had heard whispers before she even arrived. She knew the world she was entering wasn't kind to women in combat-heavy programs. She knew judgments were swift, opinions formed in seconds. She didn't care. Her father, a retired firefighter, had always told her that the only opinions that mattered were those earned in the field, through action, not talk. And today, she was ready to earn hers. As the recruits lined up for roll call, Carter didn't make a show of himself, but he made sure everyone saw him watching her. His eyes lingered longer than necessary, following her every adjustment of her gear. She adjusted the strap of her rucksack, tightened her gloves, and squared her shoulders. She didn't glance at him. She didn't need to. In her mind, she already knew what was coming: long hours, difficult drills, harsh criticisms. But she had trained for every scenario, physically and mentally. Patience, she reminded herself, is a weapon in itself. The first drill of the morning was deceptively simple, a timed endurance run across the base, weaving between obstacles, over walls, and through mud pits. Most recruits grumbled, some even stumbled. Carter, wearing a smirk that masked his inner calculation, jogged past Maya, expecting to leave her behind within minutes. But as the minutes ticked by, something unexpected happened. Maya maintained her pace, her movements fluid and steady, her breathing controlled. She navigated the obstacles as if she had rehearsed them 1,000 times. When she vaulted over the first wall, her boots landing silently but firmly, Carter's brow furrowed. She wasn't struggling. She wasn't slowing. She wasn't faltering. She was exceptional. By the halfway point, a few recruits had already given in to exhaustion, their steps uneven, their faces pale. Carter glanced back, only to see Maya a few strides behind him, still calm, still focused. He quickened his pace, expecting her to tire. She didn't. She matched his speed effortlessly, even catching up as they neared the mud pit. His irritation was growing. He hated surprises, and this one was an unwelcome jolt to his sense of superiority. When they reached the pit, Carter leaped over without hesitation, thinking he could easily outpace her. Maya followed, timing her jump perfectly, her landing precise. She didn't scream when mud splashed against her uniform, didn't stumble when her foot sank slightly in the muck. Her face remained calm, her focus unshaken. Carter, however, struggled to regain balance after his own landing, mud coating his boots and the bottom of his trousers. He glanced at her, anger flashing in his eyes. She hadn't just kept up, she had excelled where he had assumed she would falter. It was frustrating, almost infuriating. The run ended with a sprint to the finish line. Carter pushed himself, thinking his experience would secure him first place. But Maya's endurance, honed from years of training with her father and countless early mornings running trails in the city and climbing obstacles in local gyms, brought her neck and neck with him. They crossed the line within seconds of each other. The instructors nodded in quiet acknowledgement, impressed. Carter, however, didn't hide his annoyance. He barely looked at her as he muttered, "Lucky run." Maya simply wiped the mud from her gloves and offered a small nod to the instructors. She didn't gloat, she didn't argue. Let results speak for themselves, that was her motto, one she had lived by since childhood. But inside, she felt a thrill she rarely allowed herself to admit. The first drill wasn't about defeating someone else. It was about proving to herself that the work she had put in, the discipline she had cultivated, was worth everything. Later that day, during the first obstacle drill rotation, Carter made a point to shadow her, leaning over and whispering criticisms meant to throw her off. "Try not to fall behind, Thompson," he said with a smirk. "Wouldn't want everyone thinking a pretty face can outpace the rest of us." Other recruits turned their heads, sensing tension. Some snickered nervously, some avoided looking at both of them. Maya didn't respond. Her mind was already calculating her next move, analyzing the terrain and focusing on her next objective. His words were meant to belittle her, but they had the opposite effect. They fueled her determination. Every jab, every subtle dig only reminded her why she was here, to earn respect through action, not beauty. By the end of the day, the recruits gathered for debriefing. Carter, seated across from Maya, couldn't hide his growing awareness that she wasn't just another recruit. She had stamina, skill, and an unshakable calm under pressure. His judgmental label, pretty face, no grit, was beginning to feel fragile in his own mind, though he wasn't ready to admit it. He leaned back, arms crossed, already plotting the next time he could challenge her. He assumed she would falter eventually. Most people did. But Maya, as she quietly cleaned her gear, had no doubts. She was ready for anything he, or anyone else, could throw at her. That night, as Maya lay on her cot, exhaustion settling into her muscles, she replayed every moment of the day in her mind. The runs, the obstacles, Carter's sneering face, they all fueled her resolve. She knew the weeks ahead would be a constant test of endurance, skill, and mental toughness. But she also knew that the only thing stronger than physical strength was unbreakable will. Carter's assumptions would not define her, and the first day had only confirmed what she already knew. She belonged here, and she wasn't going anywhere. The stage was set, the tension simmering. Carter had judged her too quickly, and Maya's time to prove herself in ways that no one would forget was just beginning. The next morning at Fort Benning dawned crisp and gray, the mist curling around the training grounds like an unseen observer. Maya Thompson's alarm had gone off at 500, and by 5:30 she was already on the base, stretching quietly beneath the shadow of towering oak trees. Her muscles ached from the previous day's drills, but the ache was familiar, proof that she had pushed herself, proof that her body and mind were ready for the challenges ahead. She adjusted her rucksack and tightened her gloves, ready for whatever came next. Staff Sergeant Logan Carter arrived shortly after, his boots striking the pavement with authority. He scanned the recruits with a practiced eye, lingering on Maya for just a fraction longer than necessary. The night before, he had replayed her performance in his mind, the way she had matched his pace during the endurance run, how she had vaulted over obstacles with precision, and how calm she had remained in the mud pit. The smirk he carried that morning was forced, a thin veil over a simmering irritation. She had disrupted his expectation of control, and he wasn't ready to let that slide. The day's training began with a series of tactical endurance exercises, each one more grueling than the last. The recruits were divided into squads and assigned to heavy-load rucks, thick packs stuffed with water, sandbags, and other weighted gear. They had to march across uneven terrain, climb walls, and navigate through shallow streams. Most of the recruits grumbled, their legs already trembling under the strain. Carter seized the opportunity to single Maya out, placing her in the most physically demanding group and assigning her the heaviest pack. "You'll want to keep up," Carter said with a sly grin, his voice dripping with condescension. "Don't embarrass the rest of us." Maya didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her silence was her armor. She tightened the straps of her pack and fell into formation, letting her disciplined mind do the talking. Every step was deliberate, every motion calculated. She balanced her weight as the pack pressed against her shoulders and back, her core engaged to maintain stability on uneven ground. Her breathing was controlled, rhythmic, a steady metronome against the chaos around her. The climb over the first wall was brutal. Mud from the stream below made the surface slick, and several recruits slipped, their shouts echoing across the training ground. Carter leaped over with ease, expecting Maya to hesitate, but she didn't. With a smooth, practiced motion, she scaled the wall, her boots landing firmly on the other side. When she looked back at him, her eyes were steady, almost challenging, and Carter's irritation flared. She was proving him wrong again. As the day dragged on, the drills became even more complex. They navigated simulated urban environments, crawled under barbed wire, and sprinted with weighted sleds. Each challenge was designed to test their physical endurance, mental resilience, and teamwork. Carter, stubborn and competitive, kept an eye on Maya, trying to predict when she would falter. But no matter the obstacle, she adapted. She anticipated the slippery ground, recalculated her footing, and adjusted her breathing to maintain control. Every time Carter tried to find a weakness, she denied him the satisfaction. Other recruits began to notice. Whispers circulated about Maya's unwavering composure and efficiency. Some admired her silently, others were quietly intimidated. Carter's frustration grew with each whispered comment, each glance that acknowledged her performance. It wasn't just her physical skill that unnerved him, it was her mental discipline. She didn't panic under pressure, didn't complain when the drills grew brutal, and didn't waste energy reacting to his provocations. To him, it was a puzzle he couldn't solve, and puzzles that refused to bend were infuriating. By mid-afternoon, fatigue began to weigh heavily on the group. Sweat-drenched uniforms clung to bodies, muscles screamed, and energy levels dipped dangerously low. Carter noticed Maya still moving with precision, still focused, while others stumbled or lagged behind. He decided it was time to escalate the challenge. During a simulated combat scenario, he paired recruits for one-on-one exercises, deliberately choosing to match Maya with himself. The other recruits watched, some curious, some anxious. They had already sensed tension between the two, and this pairing promised fireworks. "Keep up," Carter muttered, a forced grin on his face. "Wouldn't want everyone thinking a girl can outlast a trained soldier." Maya ignored him, centering herself. Her father's words echoed in her mind: discipline, patience, focus. Let results speak louder than words. Carter lunged first, expecting her to stumble under the pressure, but she sidestepped, redirected his momentum, and countered with precision. Carter's surprise was brief. He readjusted, attacking again, more aggressively this time. Maya's calm didn't waver. Her movements were deliberate, each step, each shift of weight calculated. She wasn't just holding her ground, she was asserting it. Other recruits whispered among themselves. "Did you see that?" one muttered. "She didn't just dodge him, she anticipated him." Carter's eyes narrowed. Each failed attempt to dominate Maya chipped away at his ego, but he refused to show it. He was a soldier, trained to hide vulnerability, and yet every moment with Maya was a test he hadn't anticipated. For the first time in years, someone was challenging him in a way that wasn't physical weakness. She was challenging his assumptions, his judgments, his sense of superiority. By the end of the day, the instructors gathered the recruits for debriefing. Sweat-streaked faces, mud-stained uniforms, and exhausted muscles told the story of relentless effort. Carter, still simmering, barely acknowledged Maya. He had lost today, not entirely, but enough to know that his initial judgment of her was flawed. Maya, calm and composed, listened as the instructors praised endurance, teamwork, and resilience. She didn't need their words to validate her efforts. She knew what she had achieved. That evening, as the recruits filed back to their bunks, Carter lingered, his mind replaying the day's events. He realized he had underestimated Maya from the very beginning. His harsh words, the dismissive label he had assigned her, were already starting to feel wrong. And yet, he wasn't ready to admit it, not yet. Respect, in his mind, had to be earned through undeniable proof. Maya, meanwhile, sat quietly on her cot, stretching and checking her gear. Her body ached, but the pain was a badge of honor. She reflected on the day, on Carter's comments, on the grueling drills. Every challenge had been a test, and she had passed. Her thoughts drifted to the days ahead, the weeks of relentless training, the obstacles yet to come. She welcomed them. Each test would be another opportunity to prove herself, not just to Carter or the recruits around her, but to herself. In that moment, a silent understanding began to form. The training grounds of Fort Benning weren't just about physical endurance, they were about testing character, determination, and grit. Maya had already shown she possessed all three in abundance. Carter had yet to learn the same lesson, but when the time came, he would have no choice but to confront it. And for Maya, the first day had already made one thing perfectly clear. No one, not even a seasoned soldier like Carter, would define her limits. She would define them herself. Maya Thompson woke before sunrise again, her body sore from the previous days, her muscles still humming with fatigue. But pain was familiar to her, like an old friend she had learned to respect. She sat on the edge of her cot, lacing her boots tightly, and thought about the life that had brought her here. Training at Fort Benning was grueling, yes, but it was nothing compared to the foundation her father had laid for her. Her childhood had been a continuous exercise in resilience, discipline, and mental toughness, lessons that would now pay off in ways few could imagine. Her father, a retired firefighter, had been an imposing figure, not because of his size, but because of the strict standards he set for himself and those around him. From the age of 10, Maya had been dragged into his workouts, early morning runs through the neighborhood, long climbs up ladders, hauling heavy equipment, and learning to breathe steadily in smoke-filled environments. "Strength is nothing without control," he would say, standing tall as she struggled to lift a hose heavier than her own body weight. Discipline wins over chaos every single time. Maya had never forgotten those lessons. They had been ingrained in her very bones, shaping her posture, her breathing, her mind. Every decision she made, every movement she executed, bore the imprint of that rigorous upbringing. Her father didn't just train her physically. He trained her to endure discomfort, to manage fear, and to maintain focus when everything around her threatened to overwhelm. Those skills had served her well in countless high school competitions, obstacle courses, and later, in the specialized prep courses she had taken to qualify for Fort Benning's program. Carter, meanwhile, had no idea of the depths behind her composure. He still thought her calm, measured movements were just luck or appearance. The label he had given her, pretty face, no grit, was still lodged in his mind, even as reality continued to contradict it. He couldn't understand why someone so seemingly delicate could outperform him in drills designed to expose weakness. Every day, his frustration grew. And with each failed attempt to undermine her, a small part of him began to recognize that perhaps he had been too quick to judge. But pride kept him silent, even as the whispers among other recruits grew louder. On this third day, the training shifted to combined endurance and tactical exercises. The recruits were paired and sent into simulated combat scenarios designed to test coordination, physical strength, and mental strategy. Carter's eyes scanned the group until they landed on Maya. The other recruits had already begun to notice the tension between the two, sensing that something was building, a confrontation or clash that had nothing to do with physical ability alone. Carter approached her, placing himself deliberately in her path. "You ready for today?" he asked, his voice carrying a mixture of mockery and challenge. "Or should I go easy on you?" Maya met his gaze without flinching. "I'm ready," she said simply. No sarcasm, no doubt, just truth. The confidence in her voice was subtle but unmistakable. Carter's jaw tightened. That single word carried more weight than anything he could have thrown at her. She didn't need to argue, to beg, or to plead. She only needed to demonstrate. The exercise began with an obstacle course layered with unexpected challenges. Mud pits, rope climbs, low crawls under wires, and weighted carries were scattered across the course. The recruits had to strategize, communicate, and adapt quickly. Carter assumed he could outpace Maya in brute strength and speed, but her advantage lay elsewhere. She read the terrain, anticipated challenges, and maintained mental clarity under pressure. Her past had prepared her for this. As they approached a particularly tricky section, a deep pit filled with water and loose gravel, Carter leaped in without hesitation, expecting to emerge first. Maya followed, her movements measured and precise. She balanced her steps, shifting her weight expertly to avoid slipping, and climbed out ahead of him. Carter's irritation flared, but he didn't speak. Each time he tried to assert dominance, she silently countered. She didn't retaliate with words, she responded with action. During a tactical scenario involving simulated enemy engagement, Carter noticed Maya's instincts in action. While many recruits panicked or froze under the stress of simulated ambushes, Maya reacted calmly. She moved strategically, secured perimeters, and even offered subtle guidance to teammates without appearing to lead. It was natural for her, a product of her upbringing, where she had learned to stay calm in smoke-filled rooms and to prioritize safety, efficiency, and strategy over panic. Carter could feel his assumptions crumbling, but his ego refused to admit it. By mid-afternoon, the exercise intensified. Carter, frustrated and determined to regain a sense of superiority, attempted to push Maya harder, assigning her to the heaviest load carries and most difficult navigation tasks. She accepted each challenge with quiet determination. Every strained muscle, every dripping bead of sweat, every careful step was a testament to her endurance. She wasn't just completing the tasks, she was excelling, setting an example for the other recruits who had begun to look at her not with skepticism, but with admiration. During a particularly grueling climb, Carter muttered under his breath, "How is she still keeping up?" His voice carried more awe than he intended to show. Maya, focused on her movements, didn't hear him. She had long since learned to filter distractions, to maintain mental clarity no matter the chaos around her. Every day at Fort Benning tested her limits, but each challenge was simply another step in proving what she already knew. Strength without strategy, discipline without control, and talent without patience were meaningless. By the end of the day, exhaustion weighed heavily on the recruits. Muscles ached, blisters formed, and the mental toll was evident on every face. Carter, however, noticed something remarkable. Maya was still composed. She was tired, yes, but she maintained perfect form, spoke calmly to instructors, and even offered encouragement to teammates who were faltering. Carter's frustration reached a peak. He had underestimated her, misjudged her strength, and allowed his pride to cloud his perception. But he couldn't yet admit it, not to anyone, and certainly not to himself. As the recruits filed back to the barracks, Carter's eyes continued to follow Maya. She moved with an effortless grace that belied the effort she had put in. Every step, every breath, every controlled motion was a silent assertion of her capability. Other recruits whispered in quiet awe, noting her resilience, her endurance, and her calm under pressure. Carter's mind, stubborn as ever, refused to accept that he had been wrong, but he could feel the truth pressing against the walls of his pride. That evening, Maya sat quietly on her cot, reflecting on the day. She allowed herself a small moment of pride, a private acknowledgement of her own strength. Her past, the years of rigorous training, early mornings, and mental conditioning, had prepared her not just to survive but to excel. She had faced judgment, ridicule, and underestimation, and she had used them as fuel, not as anchors. She thought of Carter and the challenge he represented, not physically but mentally. He was a test in itself, an obstacle constructed not of walls or mud, but of ego and assumptions. She didn't seek to destroy him, she only sought to prove through action that her grit could not be dismissed. The coming days would bring more drills, more tests, and eventually the confrontation that had been quietly building since the first day. And as she lay down that night, exhaustion heavy but satisfaction deeper, Maya felt a quiet confidence. She knew the path ahead would be brutal. She knew Carter would continue to challenge her in ways that tested every aspect of her being. But she also knew this. She had trained for this moment her entire life, and when the time came, no one, no soldier, no instructor, no assumption, would ever define her limits. That truth was hers and hers alone. The sun had barely risen over Fort Benning, casting long shadows across the training grounds, when the recruits assembled for another grueling day. Maya Thompson arrived first, her boots scuffing the damp gravel, her uniform streaked faintly from the previous day's exercises. Her muscles ached, a familiar companion that reminded her she had pushed her body to its limits. Yet beneath the fatigue lay a calm determination. Today, she thought, would be about more than endurance. It would be about proving that actions, not appearances, define strength. Staff Sergeant Logan Carter arrived shortly after, his presence radiating authority and scrutiny. He had spent the night replaying the previous day in his mind, frustrated at Maya's unshakable performance. Every drill, every obstacle she had navigated flawlessly, gnawed at his ego. The dismissive label he had given her, pretty face, no grit, was beginning to feel increasingly hollow, though he refused to admit it. Pride and stubbornness intertwined with competitiveness, creating a tension that simmered between them like an unseen storm. Today's agenda was more complex. The recruits would undergo a sequence of team and individual challenges designed to test physical endurance, mental acuity, and tactical decision-making. Carter, noticing Maya's quiet confidence, resolved to test her limits personally. He shadowed her from a distance at first, observing her form, her packing, and the way she interacted with other recruits. He saw her efficiency in every task, the way she calculated each move, conserved energy, and anticipated obstacles. It frustrated him that her apparent composure seemed effortless, while he struggled to predict her next move. The first challenge of the day involved a combination of high-intensity obstacle navigation and weighted carries. Recruits scrambled through mud pits, climbed rope ladders, and vaulted over walls while carrying packs heavier than their own bodies. Carter deliberately assigned Maya to one of the toughest rotations, hopping to find a weakness. He followed closely, trying to throw subtle distractions, whispering under his breath, "Don't get too comfortable, Thompson. We'll see how long you last." Maya didn't respond. Her focus was absolute. She adjusted her grip on the rope ladder, her feet finding secure holds, her shoulders engaged, and her breathing steady. She propelled herself over the wall with a grace and power that belied her lean frame. Carter leapt after her, expecting to gain an edge, but Maya's calculated movements kept her in perfect balance. Each time he tried to overtake her, she countered with instinctive precision, redirecting her momentum without hesitation. Her composure, once again, unnerved him. By mid-morning, the physical drills gave way to tactical exercises, simulating urban combat scenarios. Each recruit had to maneuver through smoke-filled rooms, navigate mazes, and complete mock rescue missions while under pressure. Carter, noticing Maya's efficiency, decided to escalate. He issued her the most difficult task, a combination of reconnaissance, obstacle navigation, and strategic engagement with simulated enemies. He hoped her mental endurance would falter where brute strength had not. Maya approached the challenge calmly, her mind running through strategies as naturally as breathing. Years of training with her father had taught her to stay cool under pressure, to anticipate the unpredictable and to act decisively. The recruits around her floundered in the smoke and chaos, but she moved with precision. Each decision was deliberate, each action purposeful. Carter followed, tense and calculating, trying to find a misstep. But time and again, Maya executed flawlessly, leaving him silently seething. The tension between them began to ripple through the unit. Other recruits noticed the silent standoff, some anxious, some curious. Whispers spread about the seemingly endless patience and unshakable skill Maya displayed. Carter, for the first time in years, encountered someone who could match his level of discipline and strategic thinking, but his pride would not let him acknowledge it. He redoubled his efforts to challenge her, subtly critiquing every movement, issuing unnecessary commands, and pushing her physically harder than anyone else. During a critical stage of the exercise, Carter tried to force Maya into a trap. He directed her through a narrow corridor, intending to block her exit and slow her down. But Maya anticipated the maneuver. With fluid agility, she pivoted, used his own momentum against him, and emerged unscathed while he momentarily stumbled. Other recruits gasped, and a few exchanged amazed glances. Carter's frustration boiled beneath the surface, but he forced himself to continue, unwilling to admit defeat. He had underestimated her patience, her foresight, and her unyielding focus. The exercises stretched into the afternoon, each more exhausting than the last. Maya's endurance, both physical and mental, remained unmatched. Carter, pushing himself to the limit, realized that her skill was not a fluke. It was cultivated, deliberate, and deeply ingrained. For the first time, he experienced a gnawing sense of doubt. His dismissive judgment of her as merely a pretty face had blinded him to the reality of her strength. Yet his stubbornness prevented him from voicing this realization. By the time the day's exercises concluded, the recruits were battered, mud-streaked, and exhausted. Carter's pride had been bruised repeatedly, though he maintained a veneer of authority. He observed Maya quietly as she cleaned her gear, stretching methodically and reviewing the day's lessons in her mind. Her calmness was infuriating to him. Not arrogance, not showmanship, but quiet confidence, honed from years of preparation and self-discipline. Later in the barracks, Carter found himself unable to ignore the truth any longer. Maya had challenged every assumption he had made. She had endured, adapted, and outperformed, all without arrogance or complaint. For the first time, he began to question his own judgment and the ease with which he labeled others. Yet, he remained silent, wrestling with a mix of frustration, admiration, and reluctant respect. Maya, meanwhile, reflected on the day's events with quiet satisfaction. She recognized the growing tension with Carter, not as a personal vendetta, but as a natural test of resilience. His challenges were real, but they were also opportunities to demonstrate what she had learned through years of rigorous training and mental conditioning. Every drill, every obstacle, every subtle provocation had been a chance to refine her focus and assert her capabilities. That night, as Maya lay on her cot, exhaustion and accomplishment mingled. She replayed the day's challenges, the moments of doubt, the precise calculations that allowed her to stay ahead, and the way she had silently countered Carter's attempts to undermine her. Her mind was alive, not with fear or fatigue, but with strategy and anticipation. She knew the weeks ahead would test her even further, but she welcomed the challenge. Every step, every decision, every silent exchange with Carter was preparing her for what she sensed was coming. A confrontation that would reveal not just physical skill, but grit, determination, and unshakable mental discipline. And somewhere in the shadows of the barracks, Carter lay awake as well, replaying the day in his mind. Every misstep he thought he had forced upon Maya had been anticipated, every trap countered, every expectation defied. He had underestimated her, and that realization, though unwelcome, burned in him like a quiet, persistent ember. The rising tension between them was no longer just a clash of personalities. It was a collision of skill, determination, and willpower, setting the stage for a confrontation that neither of them could avoid. By the end of Part 4, the foundation had been laid. Maya's past had forged her resilience. Carter's pride had built the walls of challenge she would have to overcome. The unit watched, some in awe, some in anxiety, as the subtle battle of skill, patience, and mental endurance unfolded. And with every day, the inevitability of their eventual showdown drew nearer, a test not just of strength, but of grit, strategy, and unbreakable will. The morning air at Fort Benning was electric with tension. Recruits gathered on the training field, their boots kicking up dust, the hum of activity punctuated by occasional shouts and instructions. Today was different, though no one said it outright. There was an unspoken awareness in the air, a sense that a pivotal moment was coming. Maya Thompson stood among her squad, her posture composed, gloves clenched lightly, her eyes scanning the field for any sign of what the day would bring. Every drill, every grueling exercise of the past week had led to this moment. She could feel it in her bones. Staff Sergeant Logan Carter approached, his expression a mixture of authority and subtle irritation. His pride had been bruised repeatedly over the past days, and the lingering humiliation of Maya's skill gnawed at him. He had observed her every move, trying to find a weakness, trying to assert dominance, but each attempt had been deflected with quiet precision. Today, he thought, he would reclaim control, or at least attempt to. Sergeant Brooks, overseeing the unit, called the recruits to attention. His voice was clear, commanding, slicing through the low murmurs that rippled across the field. Today's exercise is a full-force hand-to-hand combat drill, he announced. It's designed to test strength, technique, endurance, and the ability to maintain composure under extreme pressure. Recruits will be paired for one-on-one engagement. Skill, not size, will determine success. A hush fell over the crowd. Eyes darted across the field, calculating potential matchups. When Brooks called out the pairings, there was a ripple of anticipation, even nervousness. Then came the announcement that drew gasps from several recruits. "Thompson, Carter, you're up first." The field went still. Whispers circulated like wildfire. "Are you serious?" one recruit muttered. "Carter versus Thompson," another smirked nervously. Everyone knew of the simmering tension between the two, and this pairing promised to be explosive. Carter's jaw tightened. He had been expecting this moment, but that didn't diminish the sting of reality. His pride told him he would dominate, but deep down, a small knot of doubt twisted in his gut. Maya adjusted her gloves, standing tall, her mind already running through strategies. She didn't need to psych herself up. She had trained for this all her life. Years of rigorous physical conditioning, mental endurance exercises, and tactical drills had prepared her for moments exactly like this. She took a deep breath, centering herself, feeling the familiar rhythm of focus settle over her. Carter was strong, experienced, and aggressive, but Maya had precision, control, and an unbreakable calm that could not be underestimated. Carter approached with a swagger that barely disguised his tension. "Ready to go down, Thompson?" he asked, his voice dripping with mockery. Maya's gaze didn't waver. "We'll see," she replied simply. No fear, no arrogance, just truth. That brief exchange set the tone for what was about to unfold. Every recruit on the field sensed the gravity of the moment. This wasn't a drill to test endurance alone. It was a collision of skill, strategy, and mental resilience. The instructors moved to the side, signaling the start. Carter lunged first, relying on his experience and raw strength. He anticipated that Maya might hesitate, that she might falter under the initial aggression, but she didn't. She shifted her weight fluidly, dodging his first strike, redirecting his momentum and positioning herself strategically. The other recruits watched in silence, astonished at her precision. Every move she made was calculated, efficient, and deceptively effortless. Carter attacked again, more aggressively, throwing a series of rapid punches and feints. Maya countered each one with a combination of agility and tactical awareness. She used his strength against him, leveraging his movements to maintain balance and control. He underestimated her speed, her adaptability, and the quiet ferocity that had been honed through years of disciplined training. His frustration grew with each failed attempt, though he refused to show it. Pride kept his composure, but inside, he was starting to recognize that she was a formidable opponent. The combat drill wasn't just physical, it was mental. Maya's calm allowed her to anticipate Carter's strategies, predicting his attacks, staying one step ahead. She read his body language, noticing subtle shifts in balance, slight tensing of muscles, and patterns in his movement. Each observation became a tactical advantage, allowing her to counteract him with minimal energy expenditure. The battle unfolded like a dance, a tense and electrifying display of skill and willpower. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours to the watching recruits. Carter's attacks became more desperate, more forceful, but Maya remained unshaken. Her breathing was steady, her eyes sharp, her posture unwavering. With a sudden, precise movement, she executed a maneuver that took him by surprise, a swift pivot and a leveraged technique that forced him to the ground. The field erupted in gasps. Carter scrambled to regain control, but Maya was already anticipating his next move. She applied a controlled chokehold, her grip firm, her positioning perfect. "Tap," she commanded quietly, her voice calm but authoritative. For a moment Carter struggled, then finally he tapped out. The silence that followed was deafening. The field seemed to freeze. Other recruits couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. The seasoned staff sergeant, undefeated in their eyes, defeated by the very recruit he had dismissed as a pretty face. Carter lay on the mat, chest heaving, pride bruised but consciousness intact. Maya released him immediately, stepping back, her breathing steady, her calm undisturbed. The instructors nodded in approval, their expressions unreadable but filled with recognition. This was more than a demonstration of skill. It was proof of discipline, training, and mental resilience. Carter rose slowly, brushing off mud and sweat, his pride struggling to reconcile with the reality he had just faced. For the first time, he looked at Maya with unmasked respect. You did well," he muttered, voice tight. It wasn't a compliment he had ever intended to give, but it was true. Maya simply nodded, acknowledging his words without pride or gloating. She didn't need to assert dominance beyond the demonstration. The results had spoken for themselves. The other recruits, meanwhile, were buzzing with admiration and disbelief. Many had doubted her from the start, yet every move she made dismantled their assumptions. Whispers of impressive, unbelievable, and did you see that? Rippled across the training field. Maya's performance was now etched in everyone's memory, not as a fluke, but as undeniable proof of skill, focus, and grit. Carter, recovering his composure, began to reevaluate not just Maya, but his own approach. He realized that underestimating someone based on appearances could be a dangerous mistake. The label he had assigned her, the smug dismissal of her abilities, was gone, erased by her actions, replaced with something far more substantial: respect earned in the field. As the day continued, Maya's victory in the drill became the benchmark for the other recruits. Her example elevated the entire unit's performance, inspiring them to push harder, move faster, and think more strategically. Carter's presence remained intimidating, but his demeanor had shifted subtly. He no longer saw Maya as an opponent to belittle, but as a force to acknowledge, a skilled, determined, and disciplined soldier who had proven herself beyond doubt. By the time the drills concluded, exhaustion had settled across the training field, but the impact of Maya's performance lingered. Recruits returned to the barracks, still buzzing with discussion. Carter walked beside Maya, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. Words were unnecessary. The outcome had spoken louder than any conversation ever could. That night, Maya reflected quietly on the day, replaying each movement, each tactical choice, and the calm focus that had allowed her to succeed. She understood that this was only the beginning. The victory had proved her capabilities, but the training at Fort Benning was relentless, and each day would bring new tests, new challenges, and new opportunities to refine her skills. She welcomed them all, knowing that her discipline, resilience, and mental fortitude were her greatest weapons. And in the shadows of the barracks, Carter lay awake, processing the events of the day. For the first time, he realized that strength wasn't just physical. Grit, focus, patience, and strategic thinking could topple assumptions, challenge egos, and redefine expectations. Maya Thompson had done exactly that. The battle between them was far from over, but the rules had changed. He had learned, reluctantly but undeniably, that labels and assumptions were powerless against true skill. The early morning light filtered through the windows of the barracks at Fort Benning, casting a soft glow over the recruits as they prepared for the day. The events of yesterday's combat drill still lingered in everyone's minds. Whispers circulated quietly among the recruits, sharing astonishment and admiration for Maya Thompson's performance. Her calm, precise, and unyielding execution had left a mark not only on her peers but, most notably, on Staff Sergeant Logan Carter himself. Carter arrived at the training grounds with his usual authoritative stride, but there was a subtle shift in his demeanor. The pride and stubbornness that had driven him to underestimate Maya now coexisted with a reluctant respect. The humiliation of tapping out during the drill had burned, yet it was tempered by the undeniable truth. Maya Thompson was a formidable soldier, capable of matching and surpassing his skill when pushed. He had not only underestimated her physical ability but her mental resilience, and that realization weighed heavily on him. Maya, meanwhile, approached the day with her usual composure. The victory from the combat drill had not inflated her ego. If anything, it had strengthened her sense of responsibility. She knew that respect in the field was earned not only through success but through continued discipline, leadership, and consistency. Today, she planned to lead by example, not through words but through action. The morning's drills were a combination of tactical exercises and endurance tests. Recruits were required to navigate a series of obstacles while carrying weighted equipment, perform simulated rescues, and strategize under timed conditions. Maya's team, inspired by her previous performance, looked to her for guidance. Without overtly asserting leadership, she naturally directed their movements with subtle cues, optimizing efficiency and maintaining morale. Carter observed silently, noting how the other recruits responded to her guidance. Her influence was undeniable, and for the first time, he had to acknowledge it. During a particularly challenging exercise, a simulated urban rescue scenario, Maya's team encountered a tactical problem. One recruit had become stuck in a collapsed area, and panic began to rise in the group. Maya calmly assessed the situation, prioritizing safety and efficiency. She coordinated with teammates, leveraging each individual's strengths, and executed a precise extraction. The recruit was safe, the exercise completed successfully, and the team had operated with a cohesion that Carter hadn't expected. Carter's attention was riveted. He realized that her abilities extended far beyond physical prowess. Maya's mental discipline, strategic thinking, and calm decisiveness under pressure were what set her apart. He reflected on his previous assumptions and the dismissive label he had given her. Pretty face, no grit now seemed absurd in hindsight. She had grit, determination, and a refined skill set that had not only challenged him, but also redefined his understanding of capability. By mid-afternoon, the exercises shifted to paired tactical simulations, testing the recruits' ability to anticipate, adapt, and coordinate under pressure. Carter found himself paired with another recruit, observing Maya as she guided her partner with quiet authority. She communicated with minimal words, yet her instructions were clear and effective. Carter's pride resisted acknowledging it fully, but he recognized that Maya's influence had elevated the performance of those around her. She wasn't just skilled individually, she was capable of bringing out the best in her team. During a rest period, Carter approached her. His tone was measured, stripped of the earlier mockery. "You handled yourself well yesterday, and today," he said, his voice tight but genuine. Maya looked up, meeting his gaze without expectation. She nodded subtly, understanding that words weren't necessary beyond acknowledgement. The silent exchange carried more weight than any praise or reprimand could. Carter's respect had shifted from reluctant to earned, recognizing her abilities and leadership qualities. The afternoon brought another endurance drill, combining long-distance navigation, obstacle traversal, and rapid response problem-solving. Maya's performance remained impeccable. She paced herself strategically, conserving energy while maintaining a consistent advantage. Carter, observing, noted her ability to balance intensity with efficiency, a hallmark of her training and discipline. Every step she took, every decision she made, demonstrated mastery over both her body and mind. As the day drew to a close, the instructors gathered the recruits for debriefing. Maya's consistent performance, calm demeanor, and effective leadership were highlighted as exemplary. Carter remained silent during the session, internally processing the lessons he had learned. Maya's influence on the unit was clear. She had not only earned the respect of her peers but had subtly reshaped the dynamic of the team. After debriefing, Carter approached Maya once more, this time with a candid acknowledgement. "You've got skills, Thompson, more than I expected," he admitted, his tone reflecting a rare vulnerability. Maya accepted the acknowledgement with quiet grace, her composure unwavering. The exchange marked a turning point in their dynamic. The rivalry had shifted from one of antagonism to one of mutual recognition, a silent agreement that respect, not dismissal, defined their interactions moving forward. The evening brought personal reflection for both. Maya, sitting on her cot, considered the events of the past week, the rigorous drills, the unexpected challenges, and the culmination of her combat drill victory. She understood that Fort Benning was more than a testing ground for physical endurance. It was a crucible for character, resilience, and leadership. Every exercise, every confrontation had reinforced her belief in the importance of preparation, discipline, and mental fortitude. Carter, on the other hand, replayed the past week in his mind. He recognized the errors in his assumptions, the underestimation of Maya's skill, and the lessons in humility that came with defeat. His pride had been challenged, but it had also been tempered by respect. He began to see Maya not as a rival to belittle, but as a standard of excellence, a soldier whose abilities demanded acknowledgement and whose presence could elevate those around her. By the end of the day, the tension that had defined their interactions transformed. Where once there was rivalry, skepticism, and subtle antagonism, there now existed a mutual understanding. Maya had proven that skill, patience, and discipline could overcome assumptions and prejudice. Carter had learned that respect could be earned through consistent performance, strategy, and unyielding mental toughness. The unit, inspired by Maya's example, continued to perform with renewed focus. Her quiet leadership and exemplary conduct had elevated the morale and efficiency of her peers. Carter, reflecting privately, acknowledged the value of humility and the lessons learned through direct experience. The dynamic between the two was no longer adversarial. It had evolved into one of professional recognition, where skill, determination, and respect defined their interactions. As night settled over Fort Benning, both Maya and Carter lay in their respective bunks, exhausted but contemplative. Maya's mind was clear, focused on the challenges still to come and the growth she could achieve through continued training. Carter's thoughts lingered on the lessons learned, the humility gained, and the respect earned. Both understood that the events of the past week had changed not only their perceptions of each other, but also the trajectory of their training and development. In the silence of the barracks, a new equilibrium had formed. Maya's skill and determination had been validated, and Carter's respect, though reluctant at first, had become genuine. The crucible of Fort Benning had tested them both, revealing not only physical prowess but the deeper qualities of resilience, discipline, and leadership. And though the days ahead would bring more challenges, both were prepared, one with quiet confidence, the other with tempered respect, for whatever trials awaited on the training grounds. The dawn at Fort Benning broke with a chill wind, carrying the scent of wet earth and sweat from previous drills. The recruits moved with purposeful energy across the training field, boots crunching gravel and mud underfoot. After the events of the past week, the intense combat drills, endurance exercises, and tactical simulations, the atmosphere had shifted. Where tension and rivalry had once defined the unit, now respect, cohesion, and anticipation filled the air. Everyone knew this was the final phase, a culmination of everything they had endured, learned, and tested themselves against. Maya Thompson arrived quietly, her posture as composed as ever, eyes scanning the field and the other recruits. She had internalized lessons not only from her father's rigorous training, but from every grueling moment she had endured at Fort Benning. Every step, every breath, every calculated movement had brought her to this moment. She didn't need validation. She carried the quiet confidence of one who knew she had prepared thoroughly and executed flawlessly. Carter arrived shortly after, his usual commanding presence softened by recent lessons in humility and recognition. He no longer approached Maya with dismissive condescension or the expectation of superiority. Instead, there was a measured awareness, a readiness to observe, learn, and challenge himself alongside her. Their previous encounters had forged an unspoken bond built on mutual respect, and today would test not only individual skill but collaboration, strategy, and leadership. The final phase began with a team-based tactical simulation. The recruits were tasked with navigating a complex, obstacle-laden course while executing multiple objectives, rescuing simulated casualties, securing checkpoints, and managing limited resources. Success depended on communication, coordination, and precision. Maya's team, inspired by her calm and efficient guidance, fell into a rhythm that balanced speed with strategy. Carter observed from a nearby vantage point, analyzing her methods and considering how her approach could inform his own leadership style. The first challenge involved traversing a narrow, unstable bridge over a simulated ravine. Recruits had to maintain balance while carrying heavy equipment. Maya went first, carefully assessing the bridge's weaknesses and distributing weight efficiently. She guided her teammates' steps with subtle cues, preventing slips and conserving energy. The other recruits watched closely, learning from her methodical approach. Carter, momentarily distracted by her precision, recognized a critical lesson. Leadership wasn't about commanding with authority. It was about guiding with insight and anticipating outcomes. Next came a series of simulated combat engagements. Recruits had to navigate smoke-filled buildings, identify potential threats, and neutralize them while protecting hostages. Maya's team moved with fluidity, combining stealth with decisive action. Her mental discipline allowed her to remain composed under pressure, guiding her teammates through challenges they might have otherwise faltered at. Carter, observing closely, could see how her ability to anticipate threats, read situations, and communicate subtly elevated the performance of the entire unit. During one critical scenario, a teammate panicked, dropping essential equipment in a moment of stress. Maya reacted instantly, redirecting the team, compensating for the error, and maintaining focus on the mission objective. The exercise continued without loss of efficiency, and her leadership was noted by instructors and peers alike. Carter, watching from the sidelines, felt a mix of admiration and introspection. The lessons Maya embodied, resilience, calm under pressure, tactical foresight, were as valuable as any physical skill on the field. By midday, fatigue weighed heavily on the recruits, but Maya's team remained cohesive. She paced the group strategically, balancing energy expenditure with precision. Carter, observing, recognized that her success was a combination of natural skill, disciplined training, and mental fortitude honed through years of preparation. The final phase was as much about testing character as physical ability, and Maya's calm, deliberate approach highlighted the power of composure under pressure. The next exercise was a timed extraction mission. Teams had to navigate a challenging terrain, locate simulated hostages, and secure them within a limited time frame. Maya analyzed the map quickly, calculated optimal paths, and delegated tasks efficiently. Her team executed flawlessly, moving with silent coordination and precise timing. Each step, each action reflected her ability to balance speed with strategic planning. Carter, observing, noted the subtle cues she used: eye contact, hand gestures, and position adjustments that communicated leadership without words. As the day progressed, the final scenario involved an unexpected twist: simulated ambushes and unpredictable environmental hazards. Recruits had to adapt quickly while maintaining cohesion. Maya's team responded with calm efficiency, adjusting strategy on the fly and maintaining morale. Carter observed the interplay between leadership, mental resilience, and tactical execution. He realized that Maya's approach, anticipatory, composed, and adaptive, represented the pinnacle of training he had spent years refining. The climax of the day arrived with a final one-on-one assessment for all team leaders. Maya was paired with Carter, not as rivals, but as a final test of strategy and adaptability. The exercise involved navigating a complex obstacle course while completing tactical objectives and countering simulated attacks. Both moved with precision, reading each other's intentions, anticipating actions, and executing countermaneuvers with skill. The challenge was intense, but the underlying dynamic had shifted. There was no animosity, only professional recognition and mutual understanding. Carter attempted to test Maya's limits, launching a series of aggressive maneuvers designed to catch her off guard. She countered effortlessly, redirecting his momentum, maintaining balance, and executing strategic maneuvers that showcased her physical and mental mastery. The other recruits observed in awe, witnessing a culmination of skill, strategy, and respect forged through shared challenge. Carter tapped out briefly during one maneuver, not as a failure, but as acknowledgement of Maya's superior tactical execution. The brief moment reflected growth for both, Maya's skill and Carter's willingness to recognize it. By the end of the exercise, the instructors gathered the recruits for debriefing. Maya's performance had been exemplary, demonstrating not only personal skill but the ability to inspire and guide her team. Carter, standing nearby, listened with respect, his pride tempered by lessons in humility and recognition. The final phase of training had revealed the transformative power of experience, collaboration, and disciplined effort. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Maya reflected on the week's journey. She thought of the grueling drills, the mental challenges, and the personal confrontations that had shaped her path. Her victory was not measured in taps or medals, but in the quiet confidence that came from mastery over her own body, mind, and determination. She had earned respect, forged bonds, and demonstrated the strength that had been cultivated over a lifetime. Carter, in the same barracks, reflected as well. The experience had humbled him, reshaped his understanding of leadership, and deepened his appreciation for the qualities Maya embodied. Her performance had challenged assumptions, shattered stereotypes, and redefined what he considered the markers of strength and capability. The lessons he learned would inform his own approach to training, leadership, and respect for others. As the recruits rested, a subtle transformation had taken place. Rivalry had evolved into mutual respect, fear into admiration, and skepticism into acknowledgement of ability. The final phase had tested them all physically, mentally, and emotionally, but it had also revealed the values that underpin true excellence: resilience, focus, discipline, and leadership through action. By the end of Part 7, the training at Fort Benning had reached its apex. Maya had proven herself as a skilled, disciplined, and inspiring soldier. Carter had grown in humility, respect, and understanding. The culmination of their journey was not merely a victory in drills or exercises, but a transformation in perception, attitude, and recognition of what true grit and leadership entailed. The stage was set for the final part: reflection, resolution, and the lasting impact of their experiences. The last light of day settled over Fort Benning, painting the training grounds in warm hues of orange and gold. The week of grueling exercises, hand-to-hand combat drills, tactical simulations, and personal confrontations had reached its conclusion. Recruits moved slowly, some nursing sore muscles, others reflecting quietly on the lessons learned. Among them, Maya Thompson and Staff Sergeant Logan Carter stood apart, each carrying the weight and pride of their journey, but in very different ways. Maya walked across the training field, her boots leaving prints in the soft earth. The memories of the past week replayed vividly in her mind: the early mornings, the mud-laden obstacle courses, the moments of mental exhaustion, and the intense combat drill against Carter. Every challenge had reinforced what she already knew: that preparation, discipline, and mental resilience were the foundations of true strength. But it was more than physical mastery. It was the ability to maintain composure, to inspire others, and to act decisively under pressure. Carter, watching from a nearby vantage point, had changed in subtle but profound ways. The confrontation during the combat drill, where he had tapped out to Maya, had ignited a series of reflections. He had been forced to confront his assumptions, his pride, and his tendency to underestimate others based on appearances. The lessons were uncomfortable but necessary. He now understood that leadership and strength were not measured solely by dominance or brute force, but by adaptability, insight, and the ability to earn respect through action rather than impose it through authority. Throughout the week, the dynamic between Maya and Carter had evolved. What began as rivalry and tension had transformed into mutual recognition of skill and character. Carter had come to see Maya not as a threat, but as a model of excellence, a soldier whose discipline, focus, and grit demanded acknowledgement. Maya, in turn, had maintained her composure, never resorting to gloating or arrogance, allowing her performance to speak for itself. Their interactions, once fraught with judgment and competition, had matured into professional respect. The instructors called the final gathering. Recruits assembled in formation, boots squared, posture rigid yet reflecting the fatigue of intensive training. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Everyone knew this moment marked the culmination of their shared journey. Sergeant Brooks stepped forward, his expression serious but approving. "Over the past week, you have been tested in every conceivable way," he said. "Physically, mentally, and emotionally. Some of you have discovered strengths you didn't know you had. Others have learned lessons in humility and growth. All of you are leaving this field transformed. Your progress is the true measure of success." When Brooks singled out Maya Thompson for recognition, the murmurs of approval rippled through the recruits. Maya demonstrated exceptional skill, composure, and leadership throughout the exercises. Her ability to perform under pressure, guide her team, and adapt to challenges is exemplary. She has earned the respect of instructors, peers, and even those who initially underestimated her. Carter stood a few paces away, nodding silently. The acknowledgement resonated deeply with him, not because of pride or ego, but because he had witnessed the truth firsthand. Maya had not just succeeded, she had exemplified the qualities every soldier aspired to. Her performance had elevated the standard for the entire unit. Carter understood that the lessons he learned through her example would stay with him far beyond the walls of Fort Benning. After the formal recognition, recruits were dismissed to clean up and prepare for debriefing sessions. Maya returned to her cot quietly, reflecting on the journey. She thought about the early mornings with her father, the long hours of preparation, and the countless challenges that had prepared her for this crucible. It was not victory in the conventional sense that filled her with pride, but the knowledge that she had stayed true to her training, her discipline, and her focus. Every obstacle had been met with precision, every challenge handled with calm resolve. Carter approached her at last, offering a hand. "You've set a standard I'll never forget," he said quietly. Maya shook his hand, her eyes meeting his with calm acknowledgement. There were no words of triumph or rivalry in the gesture, only recognition of the journey they had shared and the mutual growth that had emerged from it. The other recruits observed silently, many inspired by the interaction. They saw firsthand how respect could replace rivalry, how discipline and resilience could command acknowledgement, and how true strength was not about dominance but about consistency, focus, and the courage to perform under pressure. Maya's influence extended beyond her physical skill. She had demonstrated the intangible qualities that defined a leader, a teammate, and a soldier. That night, as the barracks settled into quiet, Maya reflected on her path forward. She knew that Fort Benning was just the beginning, a proving ground that had tested her limits, sharpened her skills, and solidified her mental resilience. The challenges she had faced had prepared her for every obstacle ahead, both on and off the training field. She realized that the greatest victories were not measured in taps, medals, or recognition, but in the growth and mastery, one achieved through discipline, perseverance, and integrity. Carter, lying in his bunk, thought similarly. His perspective had shifted dramatically. He had been forced to confront arrogance, reassess assumptions, and acknowledge talent where he had previously dismissed it. The experience had humbled him, expanded his understanding of leadership, and deepened his respect for those who earned it through action. Maya had taught him a lesson he could not have learned otherwise, that true strength is a combination of skill, grit, patience, and the ability to inspire others through one's example. In the weeks that followed, Maya's performance continued to resonate throughout the unit. Her example influenced training, teamwork, and morale. Carter, integrating the lessons he had learned, adjusted his leadership approach, fostering an environment where skill, discipline, and respect guided interactions rather than assumptions and ego. Together, their experiences created a ripple effect that elevated the performance of the entire unit. Ultimately, the story of Maya Thompson and Logan Carter became more than a narrative of individual skill. It was a testament to the transformative power of resilience, preparation, and mental discipline. It was a reminder that assumptions, labels, and superficial judgments could never withstand the reality of demonstrated ability. And it was proof that respect, earned through consistent performance, composure, and leadership, was far more powerful than dominance, arrogance, or pride. As Maya stood on the training field one final time, the sun rising behind her, she allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. She had proven what she set out to demonstrate, that grit, intelligence, and discipline could overcome doubt, prejudice, and challenge. Carter stood nearby, silent but respectful, a changed man who had learned to value skill and integrity above ego. Together, they represented the culmination of growth, resilience, and the lessons that Fort Benning had imparted to every recruit willing to rise to the challenge. The echoes of drills, shouts, and footsteps faded into memory, but the impact remained. Maya Thompson's journey, marked by discipline, perseverance, and mental fortitude, had left an indelible mark, not only on those who trained beside her, but on the very definition of leadership and respect within the unit. Logan Carter, having learned humility and admiration through first-hand experience, carried those lessons forward, forever changed by the recruit he once underestimated. And in that shared silence on the final morning at Fort Benning, a profound truth stood clear. Skill, discipline, and grit could never be judged by appearances, and respect, once earned, could transform even the most stubborn of rivalries into recognition, understanding, and growth. Maya had made her mark, not just by tapping out a rival, but by redefining what it meant to lead, to endure, and to inspire.